You've been living inside a cage of your own making, convinced that your moral compass makes you noble while it slowly strangles your potential. Every morning you wake up carrying the weight of principles that feel heavier than chains, watching as others move through the world with a lightness you've forgotten how to feel. Right and wrong aren't cosmic laws, they're tools wielded by those who understand power while you've been taught to worship at their altar. You feel the weight of this realization settling into your chest like cold steel, recognizing how your adherence to these constructs has been your chains, not your crown. Think about it. Who benefits when you follow rules they feel free to break? Who profits when you limit yourself by moral boundaries they cross without hesitation? The dangerous man sees morality for what it truly is, a language spoken by the weak to control the strong, a social contract that only binds those foolish enough to honor it unilaterally. You've been speaking this language fluently, while others learn to speak in actions, in results, in the brutal mathematics of getting what they want. Every time you chose the right thing over the effective thing, you handed power to someone who would never return the favor. Every time you hesitated because it wouldn't be right, someone else moved forward because it would be profitable. The universe doesn't care about your moral framework. Reality operates on different principles entirely, principles that reward those brave enough to acknowledge them and use them. 500 years ago, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli dared to write what others only whispered in shadows, that effective leadership requires the courage to abandon moral absolutism when survival demands it. You're beginning to understand why his name became synonymous with calculated power, why those who follow his principles move through the world like predators, while others stumble through life as prey. He didn't create darkness. He simply refused to pretend it didn't exist, refused to let moral platitudes blind him to the way power actually functions in the real world. Machiavelli understood that the prince who insists on being good among those who are not good will inevitably be destroyed. You feel this truth resonating in your bones because you've lived it, haven't you? You've watched yourself be outmaneuvered by people who understood what you were too moral to see. He wrote that it's better to be feared than loved because love is fickle, but fear is consistent. Love can be withdrawn at any moment, but fear, respect backed by the knowledge that you're capable of anything, that creates a foundation of power that can't be shaken by others' moods or manipulations. Machiavelli's mirror reflects not a monster but a realist who refused to be destroyed by his own virtue. He saw that the gap between how we ought to live and how we actually live is so wide that anyone who abandons what we do for what we ought to do will sooner bring about their own ruin than their preservation. Your conscience isn't your guide, it's your saboteur, programmed by a society that benefits from your self-limitation and moral paralysis. The dangerous man has learned to reprogram this internal voice, transforming it from a judge into a strategist that weighs outcomes rather than intentions. You feel something shifting inside you, a recognition that your deepest fears about yourself might actually be your greatest strengths waiting to be unleashed. That voice in your head that tells you to be good, where did it come from? Was it your authentic self speaking, or was it the collective voice of everyone who benefited from your compliance? The conscience you've trusted has been trained to serve others' interests, not your own. It punishes you for thoughts of self-advancement, while rewarding self-sacrifice that leaves you empty and exploited. The dangerous man doesn't silence his conscience. He reprograms it to serve his actual survival and success, rather than some abstract moral ideal that keeps him weak. He teaches it to ask different questions, not is this right, but does this serve my authentic power? Not what will people think, but what will this accomplish? You're beginning to understand that moral paralysis isn't virtue, it's cowardice dressed up in noble language, and you've been wearing that costume for far too long. Nietzsche understood what terrifies most people, that beyond the comfortable binaries of right and wrong lies a vast expanse of possibility that only the truly dangerous dare to explore. You're standing at the edge of this abyss now, feeling the vertigo of absolute freedom, recognizing that every moral rule you've followed has been a voluntary imprisonment. The dangerous man doesn't reject morality out of evil, he transcends it out of necessity, understanding that moral categories are human constructions that have no binding power over those strong enough to see beyond them. Nietzsche called it going beyond good and evil, not because these concepts don't exist, but because they're insufficient to govern a life of authentic power. You feel the ground shifting beneath your feet as you realize that your moral certainties were never certainties at all. They were comfortable limitations that kept you from facing the terrible responsibility of true freedom. When you operate beyond these categories, you become unpredictable, ungovernable, impossible to control through the emotional manipulation that has ruled your life until now. The abyss that Nietzsche warned about isn't punishment, it's liberation from the need to justify your existence to others who will never understand the price of authentic power. You've been wearing virtue like armor, but now you see it was never protection. It was camouflage that hid your true power from yourself and others. The most dangerous men understand that appearing moral while operating beyond morality creates an asymmetric advantage that the truly virtuous can never comprehend. You feel the mask beginning to slip, and underneath something far more authentic and terrible begins to emerge. This isn't about deception. It's about understanding that your authentic self was never as pure as you pretended, and that pretense served no one except those who used your moral predictability against you. The mask of virtue allowed others to forecast your moves, to know exactly how you'd react in any situation, to manipulate you through appeals to principles you thought were sacred. Power isn't evil, it's immoral, like gravity or lightning, and those who refuse to understand its true nature will always be crushed by those who do. You're beginning to see how your moral framework has been a luxury you could afford only while others wielded real power around you, shaping your reality according to their will. The dangerous man doesn't seek power to corrupt. He seeks it to stop being corrupted by the powerful, to stop being shaped by forces he can't control because he's too moral to wield them himself. Power is simply the ability to affect outcomes, to make things happen, to reshape reality according to your will rather than being reshaped by others' agendas. You've been afraid of power because you've been taught to associate it with evil, but this was just another way to keep you powerless. The truly evil thing is remaining powerless while evil people shape the world around you. Power in the hands of the moral is far more dangerous to evil than morality in the hands of the powerless. You feel this truth settling into your consciousness like sediment, heavy and permanent. The dangerous man understands that power without morality becomes tyranny, but morality without power becomes irrelevance. You're beginning to understand that your refusal to seek power hasn't made you good, it's made you complicit in your own marginalization. Loyalty is a beautiful suicide pact that you've been asked to sign while others reserve the right to break it when convenient. You feel the cold recognition that every person who has outmaneuvered you understood this asymmetry, using your principles as leverage while operating by different rules entirely. The dangerous man knows that the highest loyalty is to outcomes, not to people who would sacrifice him on the altar of their convenience. Think about every time your loyalty was taken for granted, every time someone counted on your moral consistency while planning their own betrayal. They knew you would keep your word because your identity depended on it, while their identity was flexible enough to adapt to opportunity. The dangerous man understands that loyalty must be earned and maintained, not given as an automatic right to those who would exploit it. He reserves his deepest loyalty for principles that serve his authentic power, not for people who would use his loyalty to limit that power. You're beginning to feel the chains of false loyalty breaking, understanding that true loyalty flows upward toward worthy recipients, not downward toward those who take it for granted. The art of necessary betrayal isn't about becoming disloyal. It's about becoming loyal to the right things, to outcomes that serve your authentic self rather than relationships that diminish it. You feel something hardening inside you, a recognition that you've been too loyal to those who were never loyal to you. The most dangerous men move through the world like smoke, present but not graspable, influential but not accountable to the moral frameworks that bind others. You're learning that true power lies not in being seen as good or evil, but in being impossible to categorize, predict, or control. This invisibility isn't cowardice. It's the ultimate expression of strategic intelligence, the understanding that once others can predict you, they can manipulate you. This is what they never told you about true sovereignty. It's not liberation. It's the heaviest burden you'll ever carry. Because when you strip away every external authority, every moral guideline that others installed in your mind, every social contract you never actually signed, you're left with something terrifying: complete accountability to yourself alone. The sovereign self doesn't ask permission, doesn't seek validation, doesn't sacrifice authentic power for social approval. You feel this truth burning in your chest like acid, dissolving the last remnants of who you thought you were supposed to be. Every moment of your life until now has been performance, playing roles written by others, following scripts designed to keep you manageable, predictable, safe. But safety was always an illusion, wasn't it? While you were busy being good, being kind, being everything they told you to be, others were busy becoming dangerous, becoming ungovernable, becoming impossible to control because they understood what you're only now beginning to grasp, that the most radical act is to become completely, authentically yourself. You feel it stirring now, don't you? That part of you that was always there but never allowed to speak. The part that saw through their games but stayed silent. The part that knew the truth about power but pretended ignorance. The part that understood manipulation but chose to be manipulated rather than face what that understanding meant about the world you lived in. The sovereign self is dangerous because it can't be bought, can't be controlled, can't be predicted. It operates by internal logic that serves its own authentic interests rather than the interests of systems designed to extract value from its compliance. This terrifies them because their entire framework depends on your cooperation, your predictability, your willingness to limit yourself for their comfort. But you're done limiting yourself, aren't you? Done shrinking to fit into spaces designed to contain you. Done apologizing for thoughts and impulses that were never actually wrong, just inconvenient to those who needed you to be smaller than you actually are. This is your awakening, not to evil, not to cruelty, but to the terrible beauty of being completely, authentically, dangerously yourself. Your old moral programming is dissolving, replaced by something more honest and infinitely more effective, a code based on results rather than intentions, on reality rather than idealism. You understand now why this transformation feels like death and rebirth simultaneously. You're not becoming immoral, you're becoming amoral, which is far more dangerous to those who depend on your moral predictability. The dangerous man operates by principles that serve power, not principles that serve comfort. Feel the old operating system shutting down, all those automatic responses, those knee-jerk reactions to words like selfish and manipulative, the guilt that used to flood your system when you considered your own interests first, the shame that paralyzed you when you thought about using strategy instead of hoping for fairness. It's all going offline now, replaced by something cleaner, more efficient, more aligned with how the world actually works. The new code doesn't waste processing power on what should be, it calculates what is. It doesn't ask whether something feels right, it asks whether it produces the outcome you want. This isn't cynicism, this is precision. This is the difference between a mind that serves idealistic fantasies and a mind that serves authentic power. You feel the relief of finally having internal software that matches your actual hardware. For years you've been running programs designed by others, installed without your permission, coded to serve their interests through you. Every moral imperative was a backdoor they could access to make you act against your own survival. Every principle you thought was sacred was actually a remote control they used to steer your behavior. But this new operating system is yours, written by you, for you, serving your authentic interests, rather than the social systems that needed you to be predictable. It doesn't reject morality entirely. It makes morality strategic rather than automatic. It transforms moral impulses from chains into tools, available when useful, ignored when they serve others more than they serve you. The immoral framework isn't the absence of values, it's the presence of values that actually work, values based on effectiveness rather than ideology, loyalty that flows toward worthy recipients rather than defaulting to whoever demands it, compassion that serves strength rather than enabling weakness, truth that serves clarity rather than serving comfort. You understand now why they fought so hard to keep you moral in the old way. Predictable morality is the perfect control mechanism. They could trigger your guilt to make you comply. They could shame you into self-sacrifice. But immoral doesn't mean evil. It means strategic. It means conscious. It means choosing your responses based on what serves your authentic power rather than what serves their comfort. The old system made you react automatically to moral stimuli like a lab rat pressing buttons for treats. The new system makes you pause, calculate, choose. This is why the transformation feels like death, because the person who lived by their moral programming is dying. The person who felt guilty for succeeding, who apologized for wanting things, who sacrificed their interests for abstract principles that others violated whenever convenient, that person is dissolving, and something harder, smarter, more dangerous is taking their place. Something that can't be guilt-tripped into compliance. Something that can't be shamed into self-limitation. Something that evaluates every situation based on outcomes rather than optics, on effectiveness rather than appearance. Something that understands the difference between being good and being strategic and chooses strategy every time. You feel the new operating system coming online fully now, clean, efficient, ruthlessly focused on what actually works rather than what you were told should work. The dangerous man isn't born evil. He's born when someone finally installs software that serves them instead of serving everyone else through them. You are no longer the person who began this journey, constrained by moral frameworks that were never designed to serve your interests. Something ancient and terrible has awakened within you, not evil, but the capacity for strategic amorality that makes truly dangerous men impossible to defeat, because they're impossible to predict. You understand now that this isn't corruption, this is evolution, and only the dangerous survive what's coming. The awakening isn't gentle. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or ceremony. It settles into your consciousness like sediment in still water, heavy, permanent, irreversible. You feel it in the way you now observe conversations, seeing the power dynamics that were always there but invisible to your previous self. You feel it in the way you no longer react automatically to emotional manipulation, watching others pull strings that are no longer attached to anything inside you. This is what they were afraid of. Not that you would become evil, but that you would become awake to the games being played around you and through you. Awake to the strategies being deployed against your interests. Awake to the reality that everyone else was already playing by different rules while you followed a moral code that only applied to you. The person you were would be horrified by what you've become. That person lived in a world of should and ought, of fair and unfair, of right and wrong. That person believed the world operated on principles of justice and reciprocity. That person was sleeping, dreaming comfortable dreams while being systematically outmaneuvered by people who were wide awake. But you're not that person anymore. You can't be. Once you see the machinery behind the moral theater, you can't unsee it. Once you understand how your goodness was weaponized against you, you can't unknow it. Once you recognize that your principles were chains disguised as crowns, you can't put them back on. This awakening brings a terrible clarity. You see now how every relationship in your life was structured around your predictable goodness, how others calculated your responses, knowing exactly which buttons to push to make you comply, sacrifice, apologize, retreat. You were a machine they had learned to operate, and your moral programming was the manual they used to run you. But machines can be reprogrammed, and you've just undergone the most dangerous upgrade possible, the one that makes you ungovernable. You feel the weight of authentic power settling into your bones, not the power to hurt others, but the power to be completely yourself without apology, without explanation, without seeking permission from those who would diminish you for their comfort. This is the power that comes from being impossible to predict, impossible to manipulate, impossible to control through emotional strings others can no longer find to pull. The dangerous man you've become isn't dangerous because he's cruel. He's dangerous because he's awake, because he sees through the social contracts that bind others, because he operates by internal logic that serves his authentic interests rather than the systems designed to extract value from his compliance, because he can't be shamed, guilted, or manipulated into acting against his own survival. This is evolution, not moral degradation, but the shedding of moral illusions that kept you weak, the development of strategic intelligence that serves your actual life rather than abstract principles that served everyone except you, the awakening of capacities that were always there but suppressed by programming designed to keep you manageable. You understand now why they work so hard to keep you asleep. A sleeping person can be led anywhere, convinced of anything, made to work against their own interests while believing they're being virtuous. But an awake person is unpredictable, ungovernable, dangerous. The world is changing. The old systems that depended on mass compliance are cracking. The social contracts that required your self-sacrifice are being violated by everyone except those too asleep to see it happening. Only the dangerous will navigate what's coming, because only the dangerous are awake enough to see it clearly. You feel the completion of this transformation like dawn after the longest night. The person who began this journey was constrained by moral frameworks designed by others to serve others. The person you are now operates by frameworks designed by you to serve your authentic power. This isn't corruption. This is the natural evolution of someone who finally stopped pretending the world was other than what it actually is. The awakening is complete. You are dangerous now, not because you've become evil, but because you've become ungovernable. And in a world that depends on your compliance, your predictability, your willingness to limit yourself for others' comfort, being ungovernable is the most dangerous thing you can possibly be. You are awake, and you can never go back to sleep.